This will be exciting, and talking about something exciting while we're talking about regulation is always a bit of a challenge, but I promise you, with these guys on stage, it will actually be exciting. I'm so happy that I'm looking into a room of interested people that want to be a part of this change that is happening in Dubai. Because the Dubai we live in today has absolutely nothing to do with the Dubai I moved to in 2008. Today, the amalgamation of talent and capital and infrastructure has made Dubai the go-to destination for blockchain and crypto around the world. And on stage, you have people that are actively driving this. But why should I tell you about them? They will tell you about themselves. So why don't we start with a quick intro? And I'm going to throw you guys a bit of a curveball over here. I want one fact about you that I won't be able to find on the internet. And Bilal, if I can get you started.
Well, I wasn't prepared for this, but I'm Bilal Jassoma, Director of Ecosystems at DMCC. DMCC is a leading international business district with over 25,000 companies. We're home to the Crypto Center, today home to more than 650 Web3 businesses. We pioneered the crypto licensing and ecosystem building. And one thing about me or DMCC is what you're asking?
Well, something I won't find on the internet about you, preferably.
Okay. Maybe I'll do it at the end of the round.
All right, okay. Erwin, over to you.
Great. So pleasure to be here. My name is Erwin Voloder. As it says, I lead policy at the European Blockchain Association. I'm a former regulator. I've worked at the European Central Bank. I've worked at the European Commission. I've done everything from competition policy and antitrust to digital transformation of industry, payments, CBDCs, and digital identity. And very happy to be here and to discuss global trends. And maybe one thing you can't find out about me, I can run a 15-minute 5K.
Nice. Here we go. All right, Samir, over to you.
Samir, co-chair of the Policy and Regulations Working Group at the MENA FinTech Association. Have been based in the Middle East for about 11 years now, focusing on financial regulation, compliance, ethics. I come from both a coding and a law background. I do a lot of investigations, public policy work, and advisory work. One fact about me, I would say I have a deep passion for Middle Eastern history.
Middle Eastern history?
Yeah, and I think that when we look at our past, we can see a lot of really beautiful points that can guide our future.
Interesting. Super. Dyma, last but not least.
Yeah, you nailed it with this question, to be honest. Yeah, my name is Dyma. I'm CEO, co-founder of Hacken. In the industry, everybody knows us as a cybersecurity company. We started Hacken in 2017, but in fact, we are really focusing on cooperation with regulators, with ESMA in the European Union. And the reason why I moved with my family to Abu Dhabi is because we tightly cooperate with ADGM, consult, help them with the diligence, and also build the regulatory products for them. Fun fact, I don't know.
Not fun fact, yeah. Something I can't find about you on the internet.
Okay, so...
Doesn't need to be fun.
Yeah, I have a small football club in Lisbon.
Nice, here we go.
Yeah.
That's a cool thing.
Yeah, and we are doing very well.
Nice, all right. Bilal,
I thought you forget about that by now.
No.
So one thing you can't find out about me online is that I love diving. And once I dived in a Japanese shipwreck, and that was very exciting.
Wow, now that's very exciting. Mine is boring. I have 3 children, and they don't see the internet for all intents and purposes. So that's not something you can find about me online. But what we can find online is all of these numbers of people, startups, entities, funds moving to the UAE. And in many ways, they say that it seems to be due to the regulation. I know where Bilal and Samir sit on this. I'd love to hear Erwin from the outside in. You know, Europe is your home. From the outside in, why does it appear that people are moving to the UAE? Or maybe I've got it wrong and people are moving to Europe because of MiCA.
So I've had the fortune of being in this industry for over 10 years now. I've lived in North America. I've lived in Europe. I travel throughout the region here a lot. And so I get to see things from different perspectives. And as a macroeconomist, it's interesting because Europe, maybe 5 years ago, was at the top of the regulatory waterfall. We didn't really have much in the way of any innovation in the United States. It was a much more hostile environment. So a lot of those companies, the large multinationals, started to turn their sights onto the European market. rightfully so. There's 450 million consumers, 27 member states. It's integrated. There's reason to believe that this would have been beneficial. At the same time, the UAE specifically started to develop its own, I'd say, hub and spoke model, yeah,
right,
which is different than what Europe was doing. And so I think for me, when I look at the way that MiCA has developed, first of all, MiCA took a long time.
Right.
So I've been involved in MiCA and spoken about MiCA and dealt with regulators about MiCA for 5 years now, and we're finally in the implementing phase of the regulation. And one thing I can tell you about MiCA is that MiCA is not a cheap regulation.
Right.
Okay. Europe, by definition, values consumer protection, but consumer protection comes with some costs. And so I think that from an incumbent perspective, MiCA is shaping up to be, by and large, what they would expect if you're a company of size. I think what the region here has done exceptionally well is create a test bed for innovation for smaller companies that are looking to establish a business model, originate capital, and then if they choose to scale out to global markets, they'll obviously look to the US and to the EU as places where they can also scale the customer base by virtue of the population density and everything else. So I think that each region has its own strengths and its own drawbacks, but capital is moving east. Generally, globally, the trend is that capital is moving east. And we don't yet know what the United States is going to do with regards to its payment stablecoins legislation. My own view is that whether we get the Genius Act or the Stable Act, it's going to land somewhere in the ballpark of where MiCA currently is for its EMTs and asset reference tokens, part of the regulation. What I really like here is that each member state of the UAE has done its best to look at things that are also around the periphery. So the staking, the DAOs, I mean, you have the DOT foundations, the ADGM, you have Ras Al Khaimah, so you have things that maybe aren't being discussed so openly in Europe from a regulatory perspective are still kind of in the incipient phase.
Okay.
Here, they're there. So.
Wonderful. Bilal, I want to play this to you because you've been part of this ecosystem that's called Dubai, right? And Dubai was built as a trade hub for much longer than just the tech adoption. You've built these ecosystems. Many people get confused with what's happening here in the UAE because they say, hey, what's the MCC? What's VARA? What's RACDAO? What's ADGM? Can you paint a bit of a picture and provide a point of view on these multiple different jurisdictions?
Yeah, sure. So while a lot of people see these kind of multiple jurisdictions within the UAE as a negative thing, in fact, it's actually a competitive diversity, I would say. Our clients here are actually spoiled with choice. They have different jurisdictions they can choose from. They can choose the one that suits their business the most. And at the end, the borders are open, so people can do business within the UAE. And it actually gives people more choices between free zones and regulators as well. But it's something to highlight as well on this, and just talking about the movement of capital. The UAE actually welcomed 6,500 high net worth individuals last year, and expected to do about 8,500 new high net worth individuals this year. And that actually makes the UAE the largest number of high net worth individuals inflow compared to the other markets, and that tells you a lot about the movement of capital.
Right, very interesting. Dyma, Hacken, I don't think anyone hasn't heard of Hacken that is in the industry, and you could be based anywhere, and any jurisdiction will open their arms widely to you and say, please come and set up Hacken. Why would you choose UAE as the home?
Thank you. I would like to make a step back and I was living for 2.5 years in Lisbon. I wanted to understand where the regulators are moving, and my conclusion was that there was a completely different approach between European Union and UAE. And this approach, to better understand, European Union decided to go from top to bottom, while UAE decided we want to align everybody with a strategic vision, and then to adopt from bottom to top. So what does it mean? So European Union started to develop MiCA, very complicated documents, a lot of work, a lot of very bright and smart ideas. It's actually, it will improve the industry if it's going to be adopted well. But the reality is that it's only a small group of bureaucrats of European Commission that understand this MiCA. And MiCA has to be adopted individually but by every country. and the laws should be voted in the parliaments, and then they have to hire regulators, hire people, and only then, maybe after 2-3 years, they will start to understand what is crypto,
Right.
and somehow it will work. Well, UAE, so there was a strategic vision. We want to have the best conditions for entrepreneurs to run crypto business in the legit way. Let's do it. How are we going to do it? Let's try from the bottom to top. And that's why they started crypto regulation, allowing different emirates and free trade zones to basically experiment. So they give them the opportunity to start licensing, and then, like what we see right now, is amazing teams of Vara, DGM, Ragdao that already understand crypto well. They understand the ecosystem.
Right.
They have very amazing stuff.
Native people.
Yes. Yeah. And the next step, just that everybody's aligned, is that there is going to be a federal level regulator. It is already SCA, Security Commodities Authority, that will take the best ideas and they will basically create the regulator and give licenses to global platforms. They will have the best knowledge in the industry, and they will start signing the international treaty agreements with other regulators that will recognize the license of different countries.
Right.
So this approach is absolutely amazing. The way we work with ADGM, that they listen,
Right.
they are proactive. You always can go and talk to them. You cannot find it anywhere in the world. So there is no brainer that I moved with my family, 2 kids, not 3.
Nice.
Yeah, to Abu Dhabi.
Amazing. I mean, Samir, you're the only lawyer on this regulatory panel, so I'd love for you to paint us a little bit of a picture of what's happening in the world, and then maybe zoom in on why it seems that the UAE is attracting so much talent.
I mean, look, there's so much going on in the world in terms of crypto regulation and policy, and we're seeing shifts. So, of course, we start with MiCA, right? That's initially hailed as a fantastic set of regulations. I think anything that really comes out of Europe, given the kind of bureaucratic process, is often observed from the outside as a potential golden standard. GDPR was an example of that. MiCA, not so much.
Right.
I think MiCA, it's great that it's, incredibly consumer protection led, but we're seeing lots of delistings and relocations. For example, Tether moving to El Salvador, etc. And there's one of the biggest headlines is that it's not really going to be it not really is conducive for the incumbents into the industry, right? Plus, then you got the point that you were mentioning, Dyma, in terms of the fragmentation. Malta, for example, was one of the original countries in the EU that really understood crypto, and then Portugal as well. But you really have a disfragmented system. Plus, to your point, Dyma, and it's very relevant to coming back to the UAE, the knowledge at the regulatory level in terms of do they actually even understand blockchain technology as a basic, right? So you get a mixed picture, and asking the financial regulator that doesn't have that background to then review crypto or CASP applications is almost wishful thinking. And we're seeing that in some cases, right? With France and Germany, there's huge bottleneck in applications, and we're going to see, it's going to take a while. The SEC in the States, of course, right? Treating everything under the Howey test as a security. I mean, it's such a low threshold. So the Howey test is a case from 1946 where a farmer wanted to parcel a piece of his land to grow a unique kind of citrus fruit, which he didn't grow in his farm. He didn't want to raise bank. He didn't want to raise debt. He didn't want to give equity. So he said, what should I do? And he issued these kind of what was then determined by the Supreme Court as investment certificates. And it's under that legislation, which is, are you investing money in a common enterprise with the expectation of return derived from the value, derived from the efforts of others? If it's that 4 things, which can be so many things, it's a security. Right, so it's really stifled innovation, and of course now with the new administration, the new SEC chair, we got David Sachs, who is the new crypto and AI czar for the White House. He's in the UAE as we speak, according to the news, and look, there's the stablecoin reserve legislation that is coming out on the executive order that was passed. Hopefully, we're going to see some policy development there.
All right, so that's Europe and the US. How about further east?
Further east, I mean, look, Japan, when I look at Japan, I see a model which is very interesting because the crypto association in Japan is regarded by the Japanese FSA, the regulatory authority, as a self-regulatory organization. So a lot of these regulators will say, you can deal with crypto if you're regulated, etc., and you can only deal with the crypto that's approved, the virtual assets that's approved further to a white list or a published approved list of. And usually it's the regulators that do that review. In Japan, it's actually a self-regulatory organization. It's the market that actually considers what is, in collaboration with the regulator, but it's really the market. And that's a really innovative thing that we've seen. Where we've seen the same approach in the UAE is ESCA, the Federal Security and Commodities Authority, have given the status to the exchange house, to the exchanges, DFM and ADX, to be self-regulatory. Because they say, look, you're the market, you're the exchange, you can pass things a lot more quickly than at a federal level.
Decentralized regulations.
Exactly, and it works. It works, in strategic context. Bringing it back to and just some very quickly in terms of some huge policy shifts we've seen recently. One potential and one potentially in the not great direction is Nigeria and Pakistan. So Nigeria was like no crypto, not allowed, although huge adoption by the public, etc. And they've just a few months ago they've said, look, we will regulate crypto as a security. So they've gone to regulate, not regulating to regulating, but going a bit harsh. Pakistan is a promising picture.
Right.
They've gone from no crypto at all to now the Ministry of Finance having the National Crypto Council, and they're looking to the Middle East and the UAE as inspiration. Yeah. Bringing it back to the UAE, I mean, Abu Dhabi ADGM was the first regulator in the GCC to come out with any guidance, in line with FINMA from Switzerland and MAS in Singapore. Bahrain followed pretty much, if not the same time, around the same month with the Central Bank of Bahrain. The key distinction there is that we have regulators, and we've seen that again with the DIFC over the years, and we've seen that especially with VARA being the first dedicated virtual asset service, vast sector regulator, right? We haven't really seen a dedicated one in the world. We've seen financial regulators trying to upskill. And sometimes
I need you to wrap up the point, please.
So look, that's the picture, and I think what we have over here is a regulator that listens to the market, forward thinking, not shy to test the boundaries. And now we're talking about real world assets, DeFi, DAOs, as you mentioned, governance token, corporate wrappers around decentralized autonomous organizations, and so we're really in a privilege to be in such an environment.
We are. I agree with that. And the DMCC, Bilal, really became the heart and center of this entire ecosystem. I'm very proud to have played my little part in that. And I think today you are the sample for, obviously there's all great ecosystem, but I think what's happening in the DMCC really defines what is happening in the wider UAE, right? I think, what is the latest numbers? 620?
650.
650, mashallah, of the crypto entities, and my latest count is 2,000, and 1,000 of them being native, right? So the majority, more than 60%, live in the DMCC. Obviously, regulation has been ramped up over the past couple of years, right? We didn't have VARA when we started, and today we're at a point where there's VARA, there's ADGM, there's Ras Al Khaimah who are doing stuff. Can you give us a little bit of a point of view of if that's reflected in the numbers? Have people fled because of regulation? Have you seen companies arrive here because of the regulation? I'd love to hear your point of view.
Certainly. I mean, look, there's something that maybe a lot of people take for granted, is that the UAE has a very politically stable environment, right, and that has a very positive impact on the regulatory stability as well. So while a lot of countries have a political shift that will hinder or have a U-turn on the regulatory framework, which will then disrupt businesses, for the UAE, the crypto compass has been moving forward only. And ever since we decided to be a crypto-friendly country and city, we've only been moving forward. And that gave businesses assurance that their investment is safe, their company is sustainable, and the growth is future-proof. And that is priceless, in my opinion. And after that, of course, when you have strategies from the Dubai government that help push top-down the Web3 adoption and crypto adoption across different entities, RTA is an example, Dubai Customs is another, Dubai Police as well. And most recently, VARA and Land Department signed an agreement about the tokenization and fractional ownership of real estate that actually helps. So the initiatives and the adoption from public entities help actually shape those policies and create even more need to create new crypto regulations and policies. And that also creates opportunities, right? I mean, those companies that are going to win those projects are companies that are set up here. Some of them are in DMCC as well.
Right.
And that's actually what people look for here today, right? We're here for business opportunity and not just for attractive regulations. But back to your point, so a very important thing here is that when companies come to Dubai, the first conversation they should have is with people like us at the DMCC, because they can give them an advice on what kind of license or setup they need for their company. A lot of times it does not need to be regulated from the beginning.
Right.
So you don't have to actually have to start by speaking to a regulator and maybe get yourself in a process that you don't necessarily need to. There's a lot of license activities that don't need to be regulated. And VARA has created an amazing framework whereby you can just submit a questionnaire so you can be evaluated and they can tell you based on that information, you don't need to be regulated. You're fine with whatever license DMCC gives you. And maybe later on throughout the year when the tokens are being issued or whatever the business evolves, then you can apply for the regulatory license. And my team and I have onboarded more than 700, or almost 700 Web3 companies. All kind of projects have come across me and my team, so we can basically guide according to the business model that we came across.
I'm interested, and I know the answer, but I want to give it to you. Have you seen people arrive because of these regulations, large exchanges, for example?
I mean, look, like Samir mentioned, the VARA has been established as a crypto-specific regulator. So it's not retrofitted based on TradFi frameworks, right? So they are leading with the innovators and not against them, drafting those. So definitely the answer is yes. And Bitpanda is a great example. I mean, they've come from Austria here. They've set up 2 licenses with us, custody and broker deal. And in less than a year, I mean, VARA talks weeks and months, not years, like some other regulations. And the speed has also helped and the agility. I'm
glad you mentioned them. Other than the fact that Walid is a dear friend, I think this is a great example of how amazing the regulation is. Bitpanda is one of the most regulated, or they call themselves one of the more regulated exchanges out there, or most regulated exchange in the European Union. But when they chose a destination, they chose their destination being not anywhere in the region, but they chose their destination being here in the UAE, specifically in the DMCC Crypto Center and VARA. Dyma, you had a point of view you wanted to share.
Yeah. I wanted to say that Bitpanda is a broker.
Right.
They specifically indicate this everywhere, and this is very important to understand that in a couple of years we will see a very big distinguish between brokers and exchanges.
Mm-hmm. Why don't you highlight the difference to the audience?
Yeah, so the broker, like when you see the CoinMarketCap list of 500 exchanges, maybe only 10% or maybe maximum 15 operate their own liquidity.
Right.
All the other ones, without the user consent, they are moving liquidity towards to other exchange, so to mirror their order books and provide like better, liquidity to their users. This will change, and the European Union and obviously the regulators here, they understand it, and they will start being more strict on who is calling themselves an exchange. And yeah, I wanted to add that I have already so many exchange founders that moved to Dubai and Abu Dhabi. So yeah, definitely they are moving here because
I love it. It seems that every time you're at a conference like this, maybe by a show of hand from the audience, who's here, set up here, living here, who's visiting? All right, okay. We have a nice block of 20, 30 people that are visiting, and here are the experts that you want to talk to. Erwin, I want to play this back to you. I know you and me, we've had the pleasure of interacting over the past couple of years, and I know you have a very very sophisticated point of view when it comes to what's actually happening on the ground in Europe. And I'd love to hear how companies are reacting to MiCA. What have you heard as feedback?
So I mean, let's just start with from like a macro level, so high level view. It's true that Europe has 27 member states, and these member states typically have historically in the past focused on certain competences when it comes to capital markets. So Luxembourg has been historically strong on funds, Germany and France, Italy strong on banking, and etc. And I think when you look at the way that license applications are moving now from what were provisional VASP licenses prior to MiCA and now with the implementation phase into MiCA, I think we're going to see a mirroring of this geographical divergence also in the application of which companies will do what services in which jurisdiction. And so, for example, you could foresee that jurisdictions that were strong on portfolio management before might still have companies applying for portfolio management under MiCA. Custodians could go to specific jurisdictions like Germany or France. E-money issuers, in the case of Circle, for example, is already in France. I think it's a regime that in some ways, through its notification procedure, does favor incumbents. Okay, this is something that needs to be said, right? And it's not a popular view, but it's true. And I think that arguably it's because, again, to the consumer protection aspect of it, if you're an issuer in Europe and you're handling customer funds, or you're doing transactions that are in EMTs for the purpose of payments, or you're doing something that is moving some sort of deposit value from A to B, the regulator wants to ensure that the consumer is protected, ceteris paribus, okay? I think there's also a divergence in terms of competences from the perspective of the domestic regulators, the NCAs, the national competent authorities themselves, right? So, for example, in my own experience, I think the French are quite ahead in terms of their understanding, like their actual understanding of the way smart contracts work, consensus algorithms
I thought
work.
BaFin was ahead of the
BaFin
French.
as well.
Right.
BaFin as well. So certain jurisdictions like Germany, France, Slovenia, Luxembourg, Liechtenstein, which we haven't mentioned, which is extremely important because they were one of the first to have a prospective regime. And actually, a lot of the regulations here were inspired also by the TVTG,
right.
the blockchain, the token act in Liechtenstein. So I think that Europe will likely bifurcate based on both the competence of the regulators to hire the staff necessary, but also the economies of scale in the markets, right? So jurisdictions that probably weren't behemoths in capital finance before aren't just suddenly going to become, you know, active players and moving pieces on the chessboard now that we suddenly have MiCA.
Right.
I think that it's also important to note that what happens in the US, also for global players that are domiciled here or in Europe or anywhere really, is going to have a knock-on effect as to whether those companies want to go back to the States. Like
right.
Coinbase announced that they're going to hire another 1,000 people in the US, irrespective of even having a regime in place. This is before the Senate or the House had even pushed forward Stable or Genius. They said, look, it's coming. We want to be ready. So you can't discount the United States.
No, definitely not.
80% of the top 100 companies by virtue of equity in the world are US companies.
Right.
It's still a very outsized influence.
Right.
But I think that this region has a unique opportunity in the future, given the geoeconomic trends that we're witnessing, again, through this hub and spoke approach where you don't have the burden of a European regulatory timescale. So for the audience, if you're not familiar, in Europe, a regulation is proposed. There's public consultations. It has to go through political trialogues in the parliament. It has to go through technical trialogues in the parliament. It has to go through implementing and delegated acts, so level 2 measures, level 3 measures, regulatory technical standards. And then those regulatory technical standards serve as soft law, they're guidance that are guidance, but really they're law de facto that companies have to adhere to on top of what's already in the primary text. And so if you're a company and you're a custodian under MiCA, you also have all of the RTSs on custody, on the transfer of funds regulation, on DORA, the digital operational resilience, and. So it's a process that takes time because regulation is, Europe doesn't have a common language. The lingua franca is regulation.
Right.
So I think, just to add this final point, the Commission has understood this. The Draghi report released last year really kind of was a sobering postmortem of where Europe's competitiveness sits currently vis-a-vis this region, the United States and China. And so they're really trying to simplify things. There's an omnibus deregulation package that's currently in place to cover, hopefully, /GDPR in the places where it's onerous and other things. And I think that we really need to, I guess, wait and see as to where that ends up. over the next
especially
period.
I think what's particularly interesting is how fast things are moving in the US. Samir, you work with a lot of startups, you have a lot of clients from around the world. I'm wondering, we're always talking about these traditional hotspots, the US, Delaware, Hong Kong, MiCA in Europe, here in the UAE or Bahrain or in the region. Is there someone we're forgetting in all of this that's quietly brewing and creating great regulation and we're not maybe giving them airtime?
So I think there's a lot more to come from the UAE. There is a lot of things that needs to be developed, and once developed will really unlock a lot. For example, the definition of what is onshore with ESCA, what is a security token?
Yeah.
That will really help. I think everyone's got eyes on Saudi, no doubt, right?
Right.
That's the largest market in the GCC. They are moving. I mean, what we've seen with the Central Bank of the UAE, and with SAMA is, I've been here in the region for 11 plus a few years even before that, and what we've seen is central banks going from very traditional banking sector / insurance sector regulators,
Right,
to really being at the forefront of FinTech, which includes stablecoin, which includes CBDCs and other FinTech verticals, right? So we've seen that with our own regulator here in the UAE in terms of, what they're doing with the AED-backed stablecoin, etc., CBDCs, open banking, open finance. But we're also seeing that in Saudi. We haven't seen virtual assets or digital assets beyond CBDCs coming out of Saudi.
right.
But there are some interesting papers from the Saudi CMA, potentially looking at the regulated sector, security sector, tokenization of securities. We've yet to see what comes out of Saudi central bank, but we've seen they've come out with the payment regulations in the last few years, and this is and the regulatory sandbox that has allowed a lot of different models that were not catered for previously. Buy now, pay later is an example. Qatar is also interesting because Qatar is focusing not on crypto, but they're focusing on digital assets in the form of tokenized securities.
Right.
So the QFC has, with the QFCRA, Qatar Financial Center, and its regulatory authority they've already issued laws in that regard. So we have a token act, which is very similar to the Liechtenstein Token Act, and the DIFC has one as well, which recognizes that the transfer in a token that references an asset is a transfer in the economic the ownership of that asset. That then, depending on what that asset is, with a real estate or whatever, you have to then address it at a registration level, whether if it's land or IP or whatever. But all that is coming. So in the region, that's what we're sort of eyes on those two markets. And look, other markets exist, Egypt and others. We've spoken to.
Yeah, I'm excited about Egypt, to be honest, just by the population.
No doubt. There's also all eyes on Jordan.
Right.
So we spoke with the Central Bank of Jordan in terms of what they got lined up, and in terms of being a hub for the Northern Arabia region, the Sham region. So Egypt is a behemoth in and of itself. So lots of people are hopeful, and we've seen, like I said, Pakistan is a great example of a policy shift. Nigeria has been in tandem left and right, but we've got now golden global standards around the world where we can pick and choose, and we can sort of shape in the right direction. Yeah.
Nice. Dyma, when talking about this technology, very difficult not to talk about what people describe as the talent crunch, that there's not enough talent in the world to address, all of these emerging technologies, if it was IoT or AI or blockchain. Obviously, you guys employ a lot of engineers. I'd love to understand, how has regulation impacted you in the choice of where you sit your talent? Or are you guys all digital and work from home? Or how does it work?
Yeah, we work in decentralized manner. We have an office in Lisbon, but we hire worldwide, but mostly from Europe and actually Middle East. I think generally hackathons and like bug bounty platforms, they and this opportunity for people to start to make money on their own by participating in these activities. It has created a very talented wave of developers and, in our case, cybersecurity engineers. So to be honest, I don't feel like this is a problem. But in the other case, I think every company who is in the space, they have a very strong responsibility of raising talents. And for example, at Hacken, I would say best people, these are the ones that came without zero knowledge, but with passion and curiosity and so yeah. So my strategy right now is to have very complicated entry tests. So to have like that we select 1 to over 100 people, then we get like this wave of interns, like 15 guys, and
see which one is the best.
Yeah.
I love that approach, if you ask me. And full disclosure, I'm completely self-educated when it comes to blockchain and digital assets, and I've had the pleasure of advising more than 4 or 5 countries in. Actually, even more, impacted more than 250 million lives with these regulations, right? So the knowledge is there. Please go and pick it up. I want to switch gears a little bit. I know, Bilal, you guys were working in the original form of it, working very closely with ESCA. ESCA really, and maybe you can tell the audience what ESCA is and how they fit into the picture. And now, slowly but surely, CB UAE is coming out with very specific and timely regulation when it comes particularly to stables and the likes. I'd love for you to share a little bit of a point of view, maybe of how CB UAE, ESCA, and all of them fit in the wider picture of all of these different regulators.
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, the different regulators play different roles and regulate different parts of the business. But ESCA. So ESCA, I think, was one of the first movers to regulate, and we were actually the first to sign an MOU with ESCA. But then Voloder was created, which is great, and both of them play different roles. But I'm sure you all heard 2 days ago the agreement that was signed between Crypto.com and the Department of Finance, which control all the fees of the different government departments. So now the Dubai government is going to accept crypto payments, which is fantastic and a big move into the Web3 industry. I don't have that much information on CB UAE in particular, but I know that the first cross-border transaction took place using CB UAE with China for an oil deal, and I think that's a game changer, because if you have a deal like that actually takes off the ground, there's only a lot more to come and follow. There is going to be a lot of contribution from the gold industry as well. At DMCC, we're very focused on real-world assets because we sit at the intersection of assets and tokenization and crypto. We have a crypto center, but we have a big commodities industry, a lot of gold traders and diamond as well as lots of real estate. So a lot of the real estate projects are also looking forward to how they can access that fractional ownership and access the liquidity of the crypto market. But on the gold side, we also helped one of the gold projects a couple of years ago launch their gold token, and now we have a lot more in the pipeline coming up. The use of blockchain in provenance and traceability is also big. We have some exciting luxury brands that are using blockchain also for traceability, and some diamond companies as well. As we speak, we're holding the Kimberley process intersessional meetings. Last year, we hosted one session within the Kimberley process on provenance and traceability, and that was actually one of the most attended and most popular sessions because they see the immutability of blockchain and the role that it has.
Can you share what the Kimberley process is? I feel very strongly about this. One of the first use cases I worked on. So what is the Kimberley process?
Kimberley process is a process by the United Nations to help screen conflict diamonds, so to ensure that all the diamond that is traded is conflict-free. And the UAE is actually chairing the Kimberley process for the second year running. And DMCC being the leading diamond hub, we are representing the UAE for the Kimberley process. And we actually house the Kimberley process service within our Almas Tower. So any rough diamonds that are traded in the UAE have to go through the Kimberley process, which we manage.
Awesome. Yeah, and blockchain obviously serves perfectly for that. Samir, I know you're part of the roundtables with the CB UAE, and there's a lot happening right now when it comes to stable coins and the regulations around this. Maybe you can share that with the audience in a succinct manner because we are running out of time, and I want to ask each one of you about their future vision for this. Please.
Sure. So CB UAE, like I mentioned earlier on, has in recent years gone from a traditional regulator to really at the forefront of FinTech. On stable coins, they've issued the stablecoin regulations, and they're really paving the way for the AED-backed stablecoin. Actually, under that regulation, and it's an interesting take, it actually prohibits merchants from accepting payment in any other crypto other than the AED-backed stablecoin for the time being. And if you want to have, if you're a provider that, you provide wallets or any other form of service in any other crypto, and you want to offer that kind of service to your clients where they can pay, but it needs to be with the AED-backed stablecoin wrapper for the time being. So look, we're heading in a positive direction there, and I think it's going to have huge implications for financial inclusion, remittances, etc. Right? And we've seen that CBDC projects. You mentioned Bilal with
Saudi Arabia.
The first one was with Saudi Arabia, and then China and Hong Kong and Singapore and India as well. So, look, it's exciting times for the CBUAE.
I agree.
I think what we'll find in the UAE, and this deserves a separate session, is potential overlaps and potential areas where certain issues can be made more efficient. But that's just a part of parcel of a lot of very useful and competitive initiatives growing at the same time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think it's easy to forget that, all of us are sitting here. We're all excited. Probably a bunch of you own businesses in this space and are passionate about this space. But the other day I heard a very interesting take by His Excellency El Gargawi, who's the Minister of Cabinet over here. And he was asked in an interview what he thinks of technology and human history. He says it's very important to remember that when we think about human history is billions of years, right? But when we think about our human history with technology, then we're probably just in the first minute of the first hour of the first day of the first month of the first year when it comes to technology. And all of this is super fast changing. And, we're quite blessed to be living here. I'm convinced the UAE will win this race and become the place to be. But I'd love to hear 5 to 10 years from now, particularly on regulation, where do you believe we're going to be? Is it still going to be a topic of discussion, or is it going to move into the background like no one talks about monetary regulation today? Dyma, what do you think?
I'm very excited to see Binance and Bybit to receive SK license for the global platform, both of them. This will open opportunities for them to trade security tokens, basically securities, and this will lead for their evolution into stock exchanges, like in hybrid model.
Right.
And in fact, the Bybit and Binance liquidity is already comparable to London Stock Exchange liquidity, to Chicago, of course, not Nasdaq, but so I would really want to see two financial centers, and Abu Dhabi or Dubai, whatever, Emirates, to have these two huge exchanges and to basically compete with Nasdaq.
I love it. I love that vision. All right, Samir, over to you. 5 years from now, where are we going to be?
So, a few things. I think in the area of AI, we haven't even talked about that, but that's a separate thing. I think
consciously so.
Yeah, consciously.
And by the way, I had an agreement in my previous panel that anyone who brings up AI needs to buy the panel a coffee. But
that's it.
By all means. So I think we will have a lot of regulation that interweaves with blockchain regulation there. I think the development of smart contracts, we are getting more advanced Ethereum models, from simple Lego blocks to real, hinges and screws. I think the Ethereum protocols are now developed to be modular, and I think we will have regulators expecting regulatory compliance to be inbuilt within smart contracts. I have an article, there's a magazine outside here, it's called the Integrator, and I've got a whole article published on that. It's just outside there. But I think just generally, there's a quote from Sheikh Mohammed that really touches my heart.
Okay.
It's in the context of Emirates Airlines.
Okay.
And he says, if you're not number one, you're nothing. And it's just that, that mentality from 1985 until now, and
it's so obvious,
to aim for the sky, and the sky is not the limit; it's just the beginning. That's another quote from His Highness. So, we're in a place that has that mentality, and I think a lot of us in the market, whether we're ecosystem players, whatever ilk, we feel that and we live that.
Good, wonderful. Erwin, other than moving you to the UAE, what's going to happen in the next 5 years?
Look, I'll touch on one point before I paint the picture. Yes,
Don't, because we don't have time. Sorry.
Okay,
Final
so
point,
in
please.
5 to 10 years, I think whichever region understands how to harness agentic commerce,
Right.
combine agentic commerce with verifiable attestations for machine identities that machines can transact, use different composable modular frameworks
Nice.
to transact within, and then use the necessary digital primitives, whether these be RWAs or on-chain assets, to transact with and on our behalf, will be the region that ultimately wins. Because in the future, maybe not us, but our kids will certainly not be making their own payments. And so I think that if you subscribe to that sort of future, which I think this region does to an extent, whichever region can enable that at scale and at the lowest cost will be the one that wins.
I love it. And I'd like to let you know there's stuff happening on that already.
And I think I owe everyone a coffee.
Yeah. Bilal, last but definitely not least.
In the interest of time, I'll keep it short. Regulatory passportability, very important, very needed, will be more in effect. And second, the UAE will have a lot more Web3 companies because it's not just about the regulatory attractiveness, but also all the other things. The tax regime that is most attractive here for capital gain tax, personal income tax, still at 0. Even though there's 9% tax on a lot of activities, holding of shares, family offices, holding companies are 0 rated. That makes UAE one of the top places.
Wonderful. And what better way to end this panel? Give them a big round of applause.